Hello guys and welcome to the final Twisted Fate guide video. This is part 4. This is the long part which I will include a lot of things. I hope you guys will be able to understand most of it. If there's any question you can always ask me in the comment section below. But before I want to mention a couple of things before I head into the guide itself is I was really surprised reading this last year, how I wrote, because I remember spending a lot of time on it, writing things that would be really knowledgeable to use in this final section of the guide. It's 6 pages long, so I hope you guys can stay awake and my point comes across, because it's really long and nice, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. But there's also the other thing I want to mention before reading into it is I will make additional comments as I read the text, or remarks that I find have been maybe forgotten or not mentioned. So I will comment after each section of paragraph if I can come up with something to add that's not already in there, because I reread through it and it looks pretty clean so far. So unless something pops up in my mind, I will go into the next paragraph so we can move further along the guide and move towards its completion. And once this guide is done, I'm gonna move on to Twisted Fate versus champions, and I'll probably start with Yasuo and other main champions that are the main focus, which are currently picked in this meta a lot, or annoying for most people who try to pick up or play TF on how to deal with this kind of champions or matchups that are really annoying. And there's just one more final thing to mention before we head into the guide itself is the guide is a standard generalization, so it's more of a guideline on how you approach the Lanephase and other things that will be written. It doesn't mean you need to do this. It's more of a guideline saying you can do this if the situation applies, and it's basically written to make you think more actively and use your mind when you head into the game, locking in Twisted Fate, more than guiding you and saying you should do this, you should do that. So please be open to the suggestions I mentioned in the guide, and I hope you all become more reflective thinkers when you pick and play this champion. But remember, it's a generalization and more of a guideline on how you can approach the game and the champion itself. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get down to it because I'm gonna read a lot. The first one will cover why I use Ignite, which is why I wrote some people might not know. So let's get this quickly covered. General playstyle, Lanephase and Theory crafting. Summoner spells, Flash plus Ignite, Explanation and Reasoning. The real and only true order, Flash on D, Ignite on F. Obvious joke. I prefer Ignite over any other summoner spell since it changes the pure dynamics and factors in lane. The disrespect and respect factor versus Twisted Fate players is highly dependent on the player who is attempting to assert your skill on the champion, and at the same time to bully you since the matchup allows it. Referring to every matchup, Twisted Fate is bullied by most, if not all champions to some extent. Ignite changes the dynamics in the fashion of how you can punish overconfident and disrespectful players / champions when they overstep or misplay. It simply enables the potential for a 1 versus 1 kill in general, which is a build up on small mistakes leading up to the solo kill on your enemy's part more than your own. This is more reliant, with the obvious exception of you being aware of how to manipulate them into tripping up or abusing them when they do. I call this reading and analyzing their tendencies, using your current knowledge of the information feed by what the fuck did I write? Information fed to you in the current game and the game overall. as well as your skill and self-intelligence outside the game. To sum up, Ignite enables you within Lanephase to push for factors inside the lane and manipulate them to your own advantage if knowledgeable of them, to bring a series of misplays and steps of your opponent or hard punishing when they do it out of their own accord, for a potential kill setup. So basically what I mean is you can use Ignite really cleverly and small tricks. This is really reliant on them screwing up and disrespecting you, and you can use it based on your intelligence and their stupidity, and you can push clear advantages by having it. And this also applies when the jungle is ganking for you, that you can have a higher kill execution onto him and win 2v2s, etc., which is why I always play Ignite. And I think everything in the text is pretty obvious. If it's not understood, you can pause the video and read it yourself. But let's move on to the second use of Ignite. The second use for Ignite, which I think is the more realistic usage of it from my own and Dopa's perspective, most likely, is when you gank. It enables Twisted Fate to put out more damage and close out a kill more safely and quickly in order to return back to lane and miss out on minimal farm and experience. In addition, the enhanced kill potential may save up pivotal time loss for even a first turret push or secure an objective before an escape or collapse. It's possible to save the one or more ganked by additional reinforcements. Therefore, to sum up and conclude, Ignite enhances. Wow, I didn't space out this text, sorry guys. Therefore, to sum up and conclude, Ignite enhances roams and plays to secure them quicker and safer while conserving potential minimal time loss. So the second use of Ignite, obviously covered in this paragraph, is that you can use it to gank and save time to come back to lane, and then you can also use it as pressure when you gank them to secure the kill and pressure someone else. So if you instantly gank and ignite the target and burst them down, the enemy team will be more dissuaded to actually help their teammates, as it looks like the kill has been secured. And it's just a really aggressive and good summoner use when you gank to shove kill and to save time. And I think this is the best reason why Dopa uses it, because it has a nice cooldown according to your ult level 6. And they're relatively close up to each other. So every time you gank, you basically have the Ignite up early on, unless something happens in the game and you have to use it prematurely, or other circumstance where it might actually be good for you. As for example like 2v2s, or if you manage to sneak in a cheeky 1v1 kill. And that should be the Ignite section, so I hope that came across really well. And let's move on to the traits to make yourself a successful player and Twisted Fate main. I actually really loved writing this part, and I hope it's understood. So this is called a Venn diagram, and it says on top is a Venn diagram which I would describe in each circle containing intelligence, intuition, and experience. And always in a Venn diagram, you want to be in the middle of the circle where all circles intersect, which is this area of the circle, because it's in the middle of all three, and it's the intersection point. This intersection point means you have a mix, and you're using all of these to funnel your skills both inside and outside the game to enhance your performance and actually perform on the champion and given situation. So you use everything that you have accumulated over your life and in game as a player, and you combine them. And then you also use your experience, so you use your muscle memory to actually become successful and knowing traits and stuff when you hit like level 2. I mean, that's a horrible example, but you will know everything with given time if you put enough time into the game. And that's the experience then bolstering your intuition and your intelligence overall. And it should give you a really nice approach in the game, how you tackle situations or just play in general. The third point is to know your general damage and limitations on the set champion you're playing. For a Twisted Fate player, this is crucial. This is just what I mentioned before reading the paragraph. It will help you in the range of knowing how much damage you can deal and take in order to maximize how to bait. Meanwhile, opening possible 1 versus 1s kill opportunities. It also provides inside and outside thinking of how to approach the game. It also synchronizes well with the other two sections, since experience will act as a buffer for your intelligence and intuition. There should be something here. If you combine intuition and experience alone, it will allow you to think more deeply of the game and give you time ahead to use foresight and predict things from just thinking. This stems instinctively knowing the situation that is unfolding in front of you simply based on past experience and strong intuition, instilled emotionally and subconsciously from previous games as well. The feeling and experience will persist through and aid you and offer you leeway time off to approach and develop your inner intelligence. So my point with this is you use your experience to know what can you accomplish inside the game. How much damage do you deal onto this guy? How much damage does he deal onto you? And then you use your intelligence to actually assert the situation and say, how should I trade with him? How is he playing? And then you can factor your intuition, what it's telling. Is this a good play or a bad play? And then these all intersect again into the middle of the circle, and they are gonna be a really nice mashup when you're actually trying to make decisions. But furthermore, you're gonna gain foresight and be able to predict things ahead of time from just knowing and experience these scenarios and these small traits, and then you can rely on your other parts, which is your intuition and intelligence, thanks to your experience, to make it easier for you to think ahead and deal and tackle with situations when you're getting ganked, when you're doing trades, and everything else that's applicable to the game. Now, intelligence can be used in different ways. You can be smart in real life and apply it to the game. You might be natural at playing games, but dumb as a rock in real life and cannot think deeply about the game. These two intertwine through your own intelligence and natural talent for games, and it's dependent on how well they can function or be buffered through intuition and experience. If you buffer the second and third point, it allows you to develop your own intelligence further by giving time to apply your inside and outside thinking to mash and develop your own playstyle, which is crucial. Therefore, finding a symbiosis. Oh, I mispronounced that. My brain is kind of lagging sometimes when I pronounce words. Hang on. Symbiosis. Actually, it's mispronounced, sorry. Where these all are active and interact with each other at a high level. It will set you further apart from normal players and drive you towards new heights. To conclude, the more you play, the more time you have to synchronize, and also apply the mash these three together. Apply to mash these three together. Moreover, eventually you will come to a point where you are able to rely on your intuition and experience alone while just putting your intelligence engine online and predict things ahead of time. Look at minimap or coordinate things ahead of time, which will make you a monster. Yeah, the making you a monster is true. Because if you can imply your outside intelligence of the game and your inside intelligence of the game, which is bolstered by your intuition and your experience given the inside intelligence, you will automatically be thinking, how should I approach this when I come into a game? Should I face check this bush? Should I go for this play? All of it makes sense if you have experienced it, and then you can relate and reflect on it to become smarter both inside and outside the game. But also it helps you think and intertwine the two differences of being smart when you play games or being smart when you're in real life. Let's say you're book smart, so you have really good grades in school because you're really good at studying, or you know certain patterns that work out for you on tests and things that work out, and you're really knowledgeable, but you have hard time to apply it in the game, then this path might be tricky to you, but you can bolster it by knowing your intuition and experience and the intelligence in game giving to you to openly reflect and mesh with your outside intelligence. And this goes both ways. And for me, I love to think in general when I play TF. So what can I do? How is my opponent playing? And what is he doing? And this often causes me to think ahead of time and predict and use foresight, which was mentioned in the previous paragraph, to actually point out and do things. And for me, that's the most crucial thing about this, when you mash these three together with your outside intelligence to actually approach the game at a good level and to make sensible decisions. So for example, I'm pretty sure I don't mention it in this section. There are 4 opponents in the game. One, the one that will shove the hell out of you and try always to be in front of your turret or reset. So basically I call this the shoving type of a player. If you know what kind of player he is, you can respond to it by manipulating the wave and set up for a jungler to gank. And for this, you need to be smart and knowing what you're doing and analyze your opponent, which then adjusts to your intelligence. And then it's bolstered by your experience because you know how fast he shoves, how you can manipulate the wave, and how you can maintain the wave. The second opponent is the one who pokes and shoves. And it's fairly obvious. He tries to poke you while shoving. For example, an Ori Q or Orianna Q can hit minions and hit you as well. This also works both ways if you want to try manipulate the wave by, for example, let's say you're facing a Ziggs or the other two I mentioned, you can stand next to the wave and bait for them to hit the ranged minions because you have analyzed what kind of a player they are and say, look at me, I'm standing next to these ranged minions, please cue me. And then they're like, it looks juicy, right? So they toss their Q out and the wave shoves. And this is really important because then you're baiting them because you have asserted what kind of a player they are. And then they automatically shove their wave, they miss spells on you, and they burn their mana, which is a huge part of the laning phase because both mana and HP are equally valuable. You can't do shit if you're in terms of manipulating, poking, or pressuring. Like, you're dead weight. You're auto-attacking with really, really low attack damage ratio on mages. And then the third opponent obviously is the poking opponent. He doesn't care about the lane, he plays the opponent. It's more fun, right? When you don't care about CSing, you just throw your spells whenever they're available, you burn through your mana, and you're pretty much a linear player because you're not giving much thought to the game. And versus those kind of opponents, you can either choose to manipulate the wave and take help from your jungler, because as they're poking you, they're more focused on hitting their spells. This means when they're tossing their Q, they're most likely not looking at the minimap. So when the jungler comes, you can use the psychology I was talking about in part 1 of the video and say, come, please, poke me. I'm retarded and I'm free. And it's like, yo, you're gonna come forth, you're gonna neglect the minimap, and you're gonna die because you get ganked. This also works in clever traits when you're manipulating the wave to be bigger than theirs. So when they try to poke you or take traits, you're winning them out if you know how, which then again goes to your experience more than your intelligence. And this final case, which I'm explaining, the third kind type of player. The fourth kind of player is the passive slash garbage player. They're passive, they're auto-filled, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. It basically means do whatever the hell you want with me. If it's like a real life example you guys want to know, imagine there's like a easygoing chick that you pick up and she's clueless and she doesn't know what she's doing, and then in kind of bed or anything she's just laying there and saying do whatever you want, you know, and then you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do whatever I want, man. It's cool, you know? Or you might feel some guilt because they actually suck. Um, but basically, then it's free to do whatever you want. And then going back again to the psychology part is when I wrote you can quick recall level 4 or quick roam. This applies as well to the passive opponent because you shove the wave because you have analyzed and you know you can shove them out, make them stay at turret, and then have easier way to poke them, or you can quickly roam and they might then be more focused on CSing and shoving out the wave rather than thinking, I don't think TF is level 4 ganking. Nah. Level 2 ganking? Nah. There's never a single way a TF can ever level 2 gank. Well, in games I've actually done level 2 to level 5 ganks across all levels before even getting ult. Why? Because they have allowed me to shove because they suck, and then I roam. It's fairly simple when you analyze what kind of opponents they are. And this is the best example how you can use all the traits and use your outside thinking bolstered with your knowledge of the game, which is then experience, and then your intuition to think ahead and how to deal with your opponents. And I hope that was pretty much clear on the 4 types of opponents, because I'm pretty sure I don't mention them further down in the section. So let's move on to general playstyle. Many players have asked me what makes me differ in comparison to all Twisted Fate players, and what makes the difference in me solo killing people or just playing more aggressively than the usual player on the champion. The first step is analysis. Like I said, if you can deduct which 4 of the opponent you're playing, and you're really smart, and you can abuse and realize what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right to assert their strengths, you can deal with your opponents and pick them apart. And other than that, you can make smart decisions based on your experience and your own intelligence, both inside and outside the game, to deal with your opponent in the best manner. Are they really good? Are they poking me? Should I just play passive and farm out the wave, or can I do with something with it? Is my jungler nearby? Should I manipulate it? Should I do something? Everything comes from analyzing your opponent. That's step 1. And that's what you do when the first wave crashes in. Now let's move along to the next paragraph. As soon as you approach your lane, the first wave and second you have something called cold reading. This is a regular and daily skill to have in your real life as well, where you analyze your opponent based on the information being fed to you throughout a period of time. Me and LS agree on the point where you should agree to pay a certain amount of respect to your opponent and assume he's scripting, which means assume he's 100% good at his champion. Only play different and adapt when your opponent show you otherwise. The general aim and idea on any champion is to reach 0.9% plus or above. The cold reading early on should offer you the general idea of how to approach your opponent in lane and how to deal with him or her. Can you kill your opponent, cause him to misplay, manipulate movements? This is called reading and finding tendencies. So the Ellis, first I want to address the Ellis point. There was once in a stream where he was talking about various of aspects, and he's a renowned coach. A lot of you might have heard of him. No one has heard of me though. But you should always assume your opponent's level. Either you head in and you disrespect them, or you assume that they're really good at the champion and they're doing everything correctly. And once the Zed misses his first Q, misses his second Q, misses his third Q, or does them really poorly for you to dodge a certain way, you can find pattern which are then tendencies in how they play and assert their skill. How good is he at his champion? What can I do? How can I abuse him? This is really important for you to think, and then when you know what he's doing good and wrong, you then decide, how do I deal with him? And that's the general playstyle and lane phase, bolstered by everything you know, and the Venn diagram again comes up from earlier. including the psychology and everything else beforehand I've mentioned in the guides. The cold reading part, however, is a skill you should possess in real life. It's basically when you meet a person. How are they dressed? How is their posture? How are they speaking? How do they look like? Can you assume what kind of character they are ahead in time? And that's really important in game when the two first wave comes, to analyze what kind of opponent, type of opponent he is, which is the four I mentioned before, for you to analyze what is his playstyle, what is his game plan, how do I deal with him, how good is he, how bad is he. Everything stems from cold reading and applying your own psychological and intellectual twist, bolstered and amongst your intuition and experience. And then you can cause him to misplay and manipulate movements, which is then, yeah, caught and finding tendencies, which is the next column. Cold reading tendencies. The initial cold read will read, I'm pretty sure that's lead, sorry. Will lead to you discovering tendencies of your opponent. Can you apply the diagonal or mirror psychology? How do you manipulate the lane or wave? And the list goes on. Well, basically it's more or less the things I mentioned previously stemming from the psychology section. How much of the psychology sections, which I mentioned in part 1 of the guide, can you apply to the given situation and your opponent's skill? And once you know that, you know how to play the game, how to play the entire lane phase, which I've already mentioned. So let's move to the next portion. First, to sneak in something I call true scaling. True scaling equals your opponent's self-skill plus skill on the champion divided by 2 equals true scaling. This is a measurement to know how to handle your approach from a metric system if you can beat him 1 versus 1 or have a realistic need to. The implications is behind the Korean theory and playstyle that is based on making minimum high risk plays and awarding yourself by punishing your opponent's mistakes instead. In addition, the fact to remain at a neutral state is more advantageous to you if your true scaling is higher than your opponent's. So most of the Korean mid laners, unless they're really mechanical and shoving their leads, so it also stems from who has the advantage in the matchup. Are you against a Victor or something that should poke you? Then he should poke you by all means. If he doesn't, there's something wrong. There's nothing you do wrong. There's just him being bad. Like, you should get poked by him. There's no counterplay to it. The only counterplay is for you to sacrifice both your HP, both your mana, or sacrifice CS. But you can always pick up the experience. And that's then in his hands to decide how he plays the lane. And then this is then asserted by the true scaling. How good is he on as a player, and how good is he on his champion? Does he execute the skill shots on the champion really good? Does he manipulate the wave? Then it's the player. In skill shots, how he does them, how good is he on the champion? That's also how he uses them, not just if he messes them or anything. Does he use them to zone? Does he use them to poke? It depends on all the scenarios you can come up with, and then you mash the two. And if you consider you're the better player, you don't necessarily have to win against him as TF. By going even, you benefit from your passive, farming more gold, and then you also have the global ult to have the access to roam. So if you think you're the better player, obviously if you can abuse him, you should by all means. But if you screw up and die to him, that means you're propelling him forward for him to maybe and potentially be good at the game or his champion, which is bad. So if you think he's bad, you don't necessarily need to win or push a lead towards him, because you know this guy, when it comes to late game or team fights, he looks shit. Like, he's not gonna offer anything, right? So unless you can find a clear advantage or abuse on how to deal with him, play passive and then try to shut down the other players, because this guy doesn't pose a threat. He sucks. and that's basically it. Because you will always outperform him if you think you're better. Then you don't need to take the necessary risk in the high risk game. You play the low risk, you outscale him as a player, not as on the champion itself, and then you beat him at the game, because that's all that matters. The Korean thing is something most players do because, for example, if you are knowledgeable of Crown and Faker, Crown usually beats every opponent other than Faker for years. He plays lane really well, he pokes, he mains Victor, he does so many good things in lane. But when it comes to Faker, he plays a bit more laid back, he plays a bit more passive, and I'm like, why are you paying so much respect to Faker? Obviously, maybe he's scared, or there's like a caliber between the two of them, or something that happened. I have no idea. But he seems a bit different when he plays against Faker other than other players. And that's then stemming from them knowing what the other player is capable of, and they're respecting to keep the neutral state of the game. So Crown then doesn't want to do a high risk play or try to too hard punish or deal with Faker, because he knows how good Faker can be if he has a lead. So other than shutting him down properly, he's thinking, if I just keep him at a minimum, I hope my team can deal with his teammates and we beat them as 5, because that's League. You don't win games by yourself. You can win games by yourself, but it doesn't mean you should win games by yourself. And yeah, that's basically the true scaling part. Neutral state, where you go even in lane, since you know if you attain the same or higher CS and your stats are basically 0, it will favor you, since you scale better as a player and will outperform your opponent in any situation, scenario, or team fight, which is basically what I mentioned before reading this, so it should be properly clear. Korean playstyle, attain lane control, learn to manipulate movements in the lane while acting accordingly to your opponent's movement and decision to find punishment or an advantage. So if we go back to the Crown and Faker, obviously if Crown is on Victor, which he used to play a lot, he will find opportunities to poke Faker, which Faker can't avoid. But if Faker ever screws up where he's vulnerable, he can kill him. And if you wanna see this, you can Google, I don't know, Crown Victor versus Faker Gangplank solo kill. This is something that happened because he consistently poked Faker while Faker was playing Gangplank, and then eventually he one-shot him with his combo in one rotation because Faker was low enough on HP. And that's what happened because Faker allowed himself to get poked and then stayed for the lane. And that's Crown playing properly until he gained a lead, or until Faker screwed up, which he did, and got himself killed. So if you're playing the Korean playstyle, you should use your head a lot and try to look for mistakes while playing perfect. Not trying to force mistakes on your opponent, because that requires them to be like slightly bad and screw up. But it also requires you to be highly mechanical, which I only think like the players like Faker or Shao can do, where they pressure the opponents because they're that higher or that good at the game. Also, note that I mentioned tendencies, cold reading, true scaling, Korean playstyle, and neutral state. How do you make use of these to movement and lane manipulate? I mentioned a lot on the lane manipulation before, if you know your opponents and how you approach the game, but let's go this through quickly anyway and see if I have something to mention on this section particularly. Lane manipulation. Manipulate your wave to shove beyond the middle part of mid lane and just at the outer sector of your turret range, most favorable around the pillar wall, which is 3/4 of the lane. This is done by allowing your opponent to shove in to bring your jungler's attention towards your lane, and at the same time being more safe from ganks. This can be done by simply roaming, pretending to roam or fake ward, walling in order to manipulate your opponent into believing you're gone and therefore make him shove the lane. And basically, there are multiple ways you can manipulate the wave. And if you look at this being the wave and the turrets, then obviously this part is in the middle, right? And then I should have actually a picture representation of that. If you do it like this. So these two farther sections are the turrets. Here is the middle, and then there's two pillars that connect to the brushes. But the pillars are usually like this. And then here's the bush, and then here's the pillar above. Well, you guys should know what I'm talking about. I don't need a picture of it. Between the two bushes, there are usually two sectioned walls. I call them pillars, and there are four of them in the mid because there are two bushes, and then there are basically four walls that connect and go throughout the river. And if you keep them at your pillar, you're more favorable because the jungler has the bush he can go into and gank your opponent. And this can be done by allowing your opponent to poke you or to disappear from the lane and give the false illusion that you're recalling, and it makes him want to shove the wave so he can recall. Meanwhile, you're losing golden experience because the wave will no longer be frozen. And it's very simple. Like, it's mostly psychological twist and how you abuse your opponent and how you manipulate the wave. It's more an intellectual approach, and I think most of the things mentioned in this text are fairly obvious. So you can pause and reread it, or if you have paid any attention to what I've been talking in the guide, lane manipulation should be fairly obvious. Movement manipulation. Figure out your opponent's tendencies, how he moves, pokes and clicks. Figuring out these things is crucial. It will set the course of how you approach lane and set up for punishing mistakes, ganks, or 1v1 skills. It also helps to figure out whether you can use any diagonal or mirror psychology against your opponent. Again, I talked about this earlier and it should be fairly obvious. How you manipulate your opponent is stemming from how you approach the game, from an intellectual manner, and how good you think he is according to his true scaling, which I covered a few minutes ago. And then again, it stems from the psychological section, which is in part 1. So everything is stacking up. It's not like one thing you can explain and say, do this and you can manipulate him. Doesn't work. You need to assess that he is able to be manipulated by you and then actually do it. So you then need to figure out how he plays, how the lane plays, how he clicks, how he moves, and how he basically does everything else. And then you make the proper decision to actually abuse that. But again, it stems a lot how you approach and think about the game. This is why the guide is so tricky to write, because it's not one guide that says do this or do that. It's a generalization based on your analysis and how you approach the game. Like, do you want to farm passively until you hit level 6 and miss CS, which is potential gold you might need for later because you're gonna be low on CS, be zoned out of XP, never be able to solo kill your opponent or pull your jungler towards or helping to get like carried into level 6 by your jungler if he makes an amazing gank because he notices the opponent is bad whereas you don't, then go for it. But I like to abuse everything available to me in the game. Do I see a small window? I go for it. Do I think it's bad? I go for it. Do I manipulate or try to poke him? Obviously, I go for it. That's my perspective when I mentioned what sets me and other Twisted Fate players apart. Dopa does this as well. He analyzes how the player moves. And if he changes his tendencies or pattern, it means you're getting ganked. Most likely, most of the time. Like, let's say, okay, if I give you an accurate representation. If I move back, I'm playing passive, I'm playing here, over here, the lane, and I'm, in a safe zone. And if the player keeps on doing this, it means he's a passive player. He's trying to maintain the wave. So then again, for what reason is he trying to maintain the wave? Obviously, there are two reasons. One, he spotted your jungler, or he wants to remain safe for the time being because he's doing something, or he's focusing or manipulating the lane to stay safe because he has no vision, or he wants to freeze it in case he wants to freeze it for you to come out, etc. Like, there are multiple ways. The second one is the most obvious. You're getting ganked. And how do you know you're getting ganked? Well, this player, he's passive, he's throwing his spells, he's auto-attacking, right? He's like, all of the sudden, he changes. He's never done this in, 2 or 3 minutes. He's never stepped forward, but all of the sudden he's like, yes, I'ma move forward. And it's like, hey, you're moving forward, buddy, come here. Come here, buddy. No, you're getting ganked, buddy. That's like what's happening. Let's be honest here. If he changes his pattern, it usually means someone's nearby, especially if he changes from a radical pattern where he's playing passive to a more semi-aggressive or looking for poke. And you need to analyze the different ways in both lane manipulation and movement manipulation to know the difference. And you need to know basic, like, some slight of psychology and intelligence inside the game. And that's basically it. In the psychology section, I mentioned quick roam before level 6. This is when your opponent plays passive and allows you to shove out. And you can then implement your fake, ward, or recall into an early gank. I already mentioned this. I missed this section, sorry. With all information now being fed to you and the possibilities along the fancy bold terminology, which is basically here everything I mentioned, that's really important to keep track on if you're gonna follow what I'm mentioning in this guide. You should now have a brief idea of inner lane factors. Last one is to attain the lane for an early cheese recall level 3-4 and allow yourself to be poked and return to lane with a larger purchase to confine your opponent lane or possibly kill them. This helps after asserting lane shove and knowing your opponent. Okay, so for this section, you can either fake to recall and make them come and shove the wave out, and then you pick up the wave and you reset yourself because you're both doing it. The other one is to keep yourself healthy by the point when you sit around 750 gold for your Dark Seal and Ruby Crystal, and then you shove it out by trading your HP because you're sitting at a certain amount of HP, which is healthy. There's no way he kills you, and there's no way he all-ins you with this health. If you're really scared but you can still shove out to lane, you can fake a yellow card and run at them. Because if you're faking the yellow card, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the psychology section, by the way. You fake, you're locking the yellow card and you're running towards them. It means, hey buddy, you're getting ganked, get the fuck out. And he's like, I gotta leave, buddy. And he's like, nah. I'ma now toss it on a minion, toss my Q, shove the wave, and it's like, hee, I'm running away. And then you're like recalling, you're coming back, and if they stay, you force them to stay until they miss a wave, or until you want to roam, because then you're suddenly in the driver's seat and you're having an advantage. You can deal with them, which TF shouldn't have. And most of the time, if they're focusing on trading you, no, poking you, sorry, I misspoke. If they're forcing to poke you instead, they're not concentrated on shoving the wave efficiently. So by the time you recall, you want to use your HP, even if it's a bit scary. You can get used to it, you know, it's a game. You use your HP to shove ahead of time, so they are forced to stay in lane and clear the remaining wave out. Because they're like, oh, TF is moving up, I can poke him. It's like, dude, I allowed you to poke me so I can shove it out. Now I'm coming back and I'm gonna make you stay. And yeah, that's basically it for this section. I hope it's obvious, but to be honest, like, playing TF when you know what your opponent is doing and why he's doing it, it's a hell of a lot of fun. So I hope you guys are following with me so far. Hang on, I actually need a drink because I'm 45 minutes into this video. I said it will take some time to cover, but I just need a bit of sip. See, we feel refreshed already. Always stay dehydrated. Last thing about Lanephase is to nullify the pressured image of being the prey in lane. Twisted Fate should lose all matchups. When you think of it like this, you have no pressure coming into lane. Everything given to you is an advantage. However, the enemy team will feel the pressure of denying you and play the strengths which the initial matchups has allowed them. This will open up possible mistakes which you can punish, accumulate, and manipulate with all the information I have mentioned above. Information is power, and so is being pressured, in which could be later used to win against those who truly are pressured, the ones who should be pressuring you. So again, here there's like a psychological and ironic twist is you're never really the prey or the one being pressured, because yes, TF should get poked, he should get bullied in lane, but I think in this current meta he's pretty strong and it's relatively hard to poke him out. But even if you manage to, it's like, good job to you. You're not gonna prevent me from playing my style or farming up and then roaming and shitting on your team. So if they're not doing it, then they fucked up, because you're gaining small leads which you shouldn't have on the champion. So if you think of this when you're heading into game, when people say, oh yeah, but I lose lane a lot, it's like, no, they aren't actually denying you hard enough in gold, in platinum, in mid diamond, even sometimes in high diamond and masters. They're not playing correctly. That's why you can punish them. That's why you can manipulate them. That's why you can abuse them. And that's why I've had high win rates, because I win mid and then I go and I help my team and then I crush every lane in the game. I can also roam and help the jungler, because once you have asserted what kind of level your opponent is at, you suddenly start to gain small advantages which shouldn't be available to you. And if you can do that, you're actually gonna have a really fun time playing the game, and you're gonna get ahead on a champion which you shouldn't get ahead on, and you're gonna deal damage. And wait, what? TF shouldn't do damage, yeah. I mean, you guys have seen me play, right? I do damage. I've had most damage in multiple games across. TF can do damage if he's allowed to. And that's what this stems from. So don't head into the game thinking you're the prey. Think he's the prey. I'm gonna make him hunt me. Even though you're hunting him in a way. Because all the pressure is on him. All you need to do is play, because the most safe and boring style TF has is farm lane, hit 6 and roam. But TF is about so much more, which I hope this guide has helped you realize, if you've actually watched me play and how I approach the game. That he's not a generic champion who should stand at his tower and farm until he hits 6 and roam and pray that that one ult will carry the entire game. No, no, no. That's not how you play the game. So he's much more, so think of, you can pressure your opponent by him not pressuring you enough. And that's important to know coming into the game. Now, let's talk about Destiny. Destiny usage properly is around 1.5 flash behind or diagonally zoned away from the target you're ganking. This is to shove them forward towards your team and block every possible exit. This only differs if you're facing, for example, a leaping champion like Jax or Gnar, to allow them to jump / leap you for a possible escape. Then you ult sideways to sideways a bit behind them, as they will most likely run, and you predict amount of time plus alteration until you arrive, so you line up a bit behind him sideways in order to stun him properly and close the gank out. So what I do is, if the opponent is where I'm standing here, right, then obviously I want to ult behind him, because if I stun him here, I can keep running behind. And then I can possibly have a second rotation coming onwards. If there's towards the door, which is, well, this direction, and let's say the river is behind me, I want to be standing around here, because then I'm blocking both the door and I'm blocking both behind me at a diagonal, so I'm in between both exits. And it's important to be in between both exit points, so you can cut off their route of escape and actually to rotate them if possible. So you apply your maximum damage by kiting them backwards and allowing your second stun rotation to come up in order to fully punish them. And then it's also more pressuring if you ult behind them, because it's a psychological twist. One of them will get guaranteed stun. No. There's no leaping away. There's no flashing away. One of you will die. And I will try to make sure, if my team is not, bad enough, to actually fuck up the gank. Which is then really sad, because then your team is basically inting you. Because you're stunning them, you're igniting them, possibly. Maybe you have your E stacked up and you're queuing them, you're putting out a nice amount of damage while they're stunned for your team to actually come forth. And then you're possibly even doing 2 stuns to capitalize on the kill and close it out. And then you recall and head back to lane. And that's why I usually ult 1.5 flash behind them, to cut off their escape and know that I have sufficient amount of range to actually get and stun if they run ahead of time and they react really well. When to split push and when not to. This is more accurately described and based on experience and knowledge maxed out. It is to either pull multiple people towards you, 1 versus 1, kill a quick cheese, kill and push, or shove to make them panic, a play to make your team capitalize on the rushed play/plays. One of the factors which would not allow you to split more easily would be, for example, a fed and formidable Evelynn or Nocturne. Since you need to adjust the game properly and limit yourself to realistic factors within. Can I be ulted by someone? Perhaps Pantheon. Then I ought not to push unless I know he has no ult and his whereabouts. In teamfights, either you manipulate the teamfights early on based on position champions in the game and their positioning and your item build. Else you should focus on peeling accurately and knowing your targeting to toss consecutive stuns. Best is to keep ult for one teamfights to close out even more kills or low targets, also flash engage aggressively if you know you can one-shot or capitalize on a quick play/kill for your team to engage and win a 5 versus 4 teamfight. I thought this section was for this one. Okay, so if we comment here, quick. The ult also can be used to obviously capitalize on quick kills when someone is, warding off. You have a Zonia or someone is slightly mispositioned, or you have RFC. You can ult next to a wall, so you toss the card across away from the wall onto them. So there's like small psychological or positional twist you can use your ult for, and you can be really smart in how you use it to bait or kill people in team fights and engage, which is more a creative tool, which again has to do with your experience and your intelligence of the game, of how you approach it. But I don't know why this section was mentioned here. I thought it was concurrent with this section, so that's my bad. So let's go back to split pushing. You usually split push if you know you can kill, for example, let's say a Misfortune is farming the wave. Juicy, right? If you know you can one-shot her, obviously you go and one-shot her, right? And then you're still pushing the wave and someone has to answer that wave. That means your team has advantageous numbers in actually pursuing a play. This can also then be used if you want to make your team win a Baron or something, or force the enemy team to start Baron because they view bot side. So your team can then try to hold them 4v5 while you're ending the game, while you're taking the inhibitor, or while you're putting more added pressure onto them because they need to press and decide something. We need to fight. We need to fight now. TF is split pushing. We need to go. We need to go. And then they screw up because they're making rapid decision and they're not in cohesion, which is abusable in solo queue because they're not playing as a team. No one is addressing your split push or anything. Then also the opposite can also imply you're split pushing to pull people towards you and then you quick ult and kill someone. So let's say you're pulling 2 people, you view someone mid, you're rapidly pinging him and go, okay, kill this guy, now go Baron, the other 2 are bot side, that I pulled. We're gonna be now 5v2 because we killed the guy, and it's gonna take ages for the other 2 to roam up. And then you get a quick Baron off it. Like, it works both ways depending on who you manipulate downwards, or if you apply pressure to rush them to do a play. And if they're all like recalling when you're taking the inhibitor and say, hey, I'm gonna end the game, I'm going for the Nexus turrets, yay, it's like they're recalling, right? So they all like, they're maybe looking at your camera, how far is he, I need to recall, I need to answer him quick. Then they're not paying attention if they're spread or something, that our team engaged on theirs and they're getting fucked, which is then essentially really good because your team is then winning out really hard on them because of the numbers and number advantage, because of the decision making they're doing poorly, and more for because they're not in unison, they're not synchronized by any means, and they're split. So your team are just gonna crush them even if you're not there in a 4v5, which shouldn't happen. And then if they win, you can just end the game on yourself because there's no one there for you. And if someone does recall, or two people, then again you ult to the broken team fight which is left because of your chaotic split push in forcing them to commit or do something. So there are a lot of quick ways you can manipulate the game by split pushing, but you need to know when you can and when you can't. If they have a stealth jungler or a global jungler, it's gonna be hard because these assassins one-shot you. Unless you're really fed, and they aren't, then you should go because they can easily 1v2 you and then run up with mobility boots while they tell their top lane a TP for a 4v4. I will come there, you know, in the next 15-20 seconds, and you guys hold them 4v4 until I get there for a 5v4 so they can't rush Baron or something. And yeah, that's basically about split pushing, so I hope that was pretty accurate. Theory crafting and knowledge bases. When you auto attack, you may flick your eye to the corner of minimap to take information frequently and remaining safe. So the hindsight is like this. So your character is tossing his card, right? He's stuck. Like, look, he's tossing the card. He can't move because he's tossing it. When this happens, look down on the minimap and say, oh wait, it's this direction on the camera. Okay, now I know where everyone is. Go back, your character has tossed the card, and then you move back. So usually what I do is, I toss the card, I quickly look at the minimap, I move the mouse backwards while I look at the minimap for 1 second, I click behind me so I move, and then I look back. And then I know, okay, I've CS'd, I've done this, I'm safe, everything is good in the world, right? And that's a small little trick you can do. It's nothing to do with psychology, which is not, it's in a unique section at the end, and why I'm mentioning other things. When warding, consider watching top lane and bot lane for no surprise roams. And lastly, the jungle you're against, if it is worth the risk for deep ward, or if it is needed. So for example, if you're facing an Evelynn, you want to ward the Wraiths because you can't. Oh yeah. Actually, that's old Eve, sorry. You want to ward her Wraiths and other things and get a ping when she hits 6. And it depends, like if you're facing a Zac, you're not gonna ward the bush because he can leap over the wall. Like, you need to consider who to ward and who to ward against. So if they have a Rengar, you don't want to extend really far into bushes because then suddenly you can get a Rengar leaping your ass. And that's really bad. So always think ahead how you ward and why you ward and what you're against and where the other people are on the map. If they are on the map or if they'll be missing for a while so you don't get surprise roamed or ganked upon. When baiting, pick a card. Fake quick backstep backward to stun or red card poke your opponent. Also, you may use it to throw out your wild card by showing you have no stun available to pull them forward for a collateral bait poke with your Q in perhaps combination with red card. So when you're tossing your stun, you can basically try to move backwards and inwards, as I mentioned in the psychological part about you moving to try and poke them and letting them know that you're faking or you're tossing your auto attack as you move in and out, because your character will look. So when he turns, it looks like he turns to toss. You get it? Like toss. and you can do it to bait, to poke him with red card and other things that the card has already been tossed. And when you suddenly have no card or stun, hey, from moving backwards, hey, I don't want to get stunned. He has no stun, let's go boys, let's go! And then they're stepping forth, right? Then you toss your Q, you hit them, and then you back, because you have no stun. You're not safe anymore, and you have cooldowns. So there's like nifty little tricks you can do to poke them and find advantages in the lane if you're smart. Kill threshold, 35% and below. This is based when you have stack deck E up. This is really important. Always stack up your E if you're going for a flash kill. And your entire kit with Thunderlord's Degree and Ignite up to fake quick backstep or flash on upcoming rotating gold card to fully burst. You can also manipulate this by having your card rotate with 2 stacks up on your stacked deck and auto as you pull up, pick a card and into flashing and unleashing full combo and one-shotting your opponent from 35% and below. Thunderlord was previous season, so if you have Comet or Grasp, always know that you should have the proc up before you flash engage. So auto attack the minion. The best is really to miss a rotation or flash the rotation before it turns yellow, lock it in, auto attack before, so they don't think your E is up, so they come both simultaneously, or you know, one of them shouldn't be up, and then you lock in the other one. Well, you need to actually, you can only lock in the E, because if you lock in the yellow you can't auto attack for E. So there's actually, that's my fault. So make sure you have both, and then you can flash and kill them, because if you know your damage, which is usually at this range, you can flash kill them. And this is them playing bad, trading bad, them getting ganked, and other factoids that's been in the game, and you're in a kill range to actually execute the kill. So then be smart in how you execute it, so when you try to do it, they don't pull back because you're like rotating and insta-locking your yellow. Be smart when you rotate it, how you use it. Make sure your E is up and set up properly for the 1v1 kill, so you don't look retarded when you flash and then they just flash away and you're like, I didn't even get the kill. Auto attack poke theory. Whenever you or an enemy champion attack, you're theoretically zoned for half a second and cannot attack or move as it is inserted, as it is the inserted command in game to be executed. If you can analyze and predict this to find vulnerability versus your opponents, you can manipulate and time to freely poke with the usage of your Q. This is pretty obvious. It's like when I said you to watch the minimap. If they're attacking, they're standing still when they're auto attacking, because let's say a minion is a 1 HP, you know he's gonna come forth, he's gonna smack it, he's gonna auto attack it, right? When you know he's smacking it, so he's stepping forth, he's smacking it, throw the Q, it hits. Like, he can't do anything about it. Or sure, he can sidestep if it's, you know, far enough, but if it's close enough or you predict it right ahead of time, you can actually find ways to poke him. And if you have read the psychological part, this section on the auto attack is best if you use your side cards, not your middle one, because the focus always goes towards the middle card. But if you're tossing the other ones, they usually hit. So instead of tossing the middle one straight down the line, you turn a bit. Wait, this way is better. You turn and toss this side, so one of the side cards suddenly becomes the middle one of the normal trajectory. And yeah, that's another little nifty trick that you need to know or be wary of that you can actually do. Lishbane tricks and knowledge. In case you guys didn't know, this has to be included no matter how silly or stupid it is. When you toss an auto attack, quickly press any available spell, even Destiny is included to proc Lishbane if the auto attack is mid-air before it reaches its target. So if you're tossing your set auto attack while it's hitting your opponent, you can press any spell and get the Lishbane proc mid-air, because it basically turns the auto attack that's in the air into a Lishbane proc because it's available, which is a pretty unique and both dumb and pretty fun mechanic, because I love to use it on a lot of kills when they think they live but then they get Lishbane procced. Another thing how to use Lishbane is when you gank. This is in terms of asserting whether you one-shot your target or not, and then up to choosing to pick using W first, then auto attack. Wait for the Lich Bane cooldown to come back up, then toss Q, and then lastly use your auto attack to proc it a second time around to hopefully finalize the kill. This can also be used versus tankier targets, as your kit only comes back up around your time auto attack onwards. That was written a bit incorrectly. Your kit usually comes up after you auto attack, meaning your W again, or your Lich Bane usually comes up again after you auto attack. So if you stun them, then you auto them, then you Q, and then you auto again with your second, then you have your stun up again, because you have initiated a full rotation onto them. And if you have asserted you don't need or want to fully burst them, then you shouldn't blow your Q, because you want it for the second Lich Bane proc, because the cooldown of the proc is shorter if the stun is maxed out, or if you can angle the stun so it doesn't miss the Q, obviously, because then there's no point in waiting for the Lich Bane proc, because the Q does more damage than the proc itself. So if you can't hold to hit the Q, then do it on the stun target if you don't want to do 2 rotations of Lich Bane. But also you need to address, if you can't one-shot him, you want to blow your entire kit onto them, kite backwards, but at a distance where you can still catch them, run back in when you have the next stun, and then kill them, if you don't have enough. So know your limits and know your damage when you combo them, and be wary of so they don't turn on you. Mana maintenance and poke baiting of your opponent. You can apply the radius baiting psychology also in Lanephase to try and burn your opponent's CDs and mana pool. Also, this will apply the place poke me and focus me mind game, since you direct their heads, focus and attention on you, which make your target more susceptible to ganks. Whenever your opponent is low mana, you can go on, well, to be the aggressor. Try to confine him in lane for as long as possible, as the lane just became pressure free. This also helped and enhanced on the level 4 quick recall if your opponent stays and does not recall after being unable to not shove the wave quickly enough to recall himself. This is enhanced if you choose to direct your attention for him to actually poke you and trade HP for his mana to recall and keep shove advantage and his mana pool low. I had like 2 or 3 actually miswritten things here, but the idea is what I mentioned earlier. If you have actually stuck, because now it has surpassed 1 hour, it's nearly 70 minutes long, which I promised it would be over 1 hour, this final part of the video. If you use a lot of the psychological twists and you know what your kind of opponent is, if it's the poking type or shove/poking type, he will burn a lot of mana and you can dodge them, and then you stay safe and you bait them out, and if you get hit, that's no worries, because you're still burning his mana. Once he's low, he's gonna have a hard time shoving. He's gonna look for the reset, and if you reset before that, or you bait his mana where he needs to clear the way before he resets and you manage to get back in lane, you can make him stay, and he's gonna be useless for a really long time in the lane phase until he actually resets. And by the time he resets, you have ult and you have high level enough to clear the wave without getting pressured by him, because you cleared all the ranged minions with 2 Qs, you cleared the melees with 1 red and then 2 Qs, and you're pretty much free to go and do whatever you want at that point in time. So be smart on how you use your mana and how you bait your opponents. That's basically what this is about. And obviously if he pokes a lot, which I also mentioned but I can mention again, if he pokes a lot he won't look at the minimap, so you can apply again all the psychological twists which I mentioned probably 20 minutes ago to make the gank on him really easy, because he will be more focused. So derive his focus and be smart how you do it. Irregular pattern reading. When you have picked up your opponent's tendencies and have them thoroughly analyzed, it is extremely easier to see when irregularities appear, which I call irregular patterns. This provides foresight when they break their usual pattern for CSing, poking, or positioning, as well as their overall general movement slash clicks to spot out when you're being ganked by someone. And in most cases, junglers. This is a high-level mechanic which you need cold reading, analysis, reading tendencies accurately to determine and spot irregularities better and make use of the visual information your opponent provides you both consciously and unconsciously. This should be subconsciously. I mentioned, if you have I already mentioned this part, but this was so really well written, dude, by me a year ago. Props to me. If you know what your opponent does and how he plays, and if he changes it up, it means you're getting ganked. Like, people don't usually change their patterns unless they play against you multiple times and they know what you're doing. They don't usually break out of the patterns they do, because most of the time they're not even aware that they have patterns, or they are just doing the same thing over and over, and somehow they change it. Usually they change it when they get their ultimate, when they are getting a gank from their support or jungler, or when something is happening on the map, or they actually just change their playstyle altogether. So when you know these irregular patterns showing up, first, be cautious of getting ganked. 2, do a quick cold reading and analysis if it's changed at all, and adapt to the new information. And then 3, assume what you should do with it moving onwards, and then reflect on it, whether it was the correct decision or just him being random at the time. So always be smart and use your brain. That's rule number 1. Well, I wrote notice and thanks. If I missed any information concerning Lanephase, general gameplay, or fear crafting that is unclear, can be added or needs more explanation on, please message me on Discord, League, or mention it on stream. Well, I had this still instilled in the text, so I guess mention it in the comment section if something was unclear and you didn't understand. Hopefully I will be able to answer it, but I think, like, this is so well written instead of generalization on how you play the champion and how you think of the game and how it describes me as a player. So I hope it comes across for you guys to see how I play, what I do, and maybe possibly how I use my head and how I approach the game in general. So I just hope this makes it a lot clearer. I know this video has been taking over an hour, so for those who have watched, God bless, you know, that you managed to stay awake. But I had a lot of people proofreading my guide, and they said it was really amazing in the things I actually broke down piece by piece, and what I mentioned in the things, and how you should approach the game as a player from an intellectual point of view. So I hope you guys enjoyed it really overall, and if you want to tip me, it's in the description below how you can tip me on Twitch. If you want to show appreciation, or you know, you want to maybe make my daily life a little bit easier, if you enjoyed the guides, you know, wanna tip a nice donation or show your support, it's always appreciated, because I put a lot of time into this last year, and I was actually planning on selling the guide on stream. I wasn't planning to release it onto YouTube because it took me a lot of time, and I really didn't gain anything from writing it. But hopefully this video gets a lot of views, and the support from you guys and reading the comments always makes me happy. And I will continue doing the good work I've been doing and try to move on to the Twisted Fate versus champions, meaning like champions in the game, like Yasuo or Zed specific matchups. And I just hope this came across really easy for you guys to understand. If you don't feel bad. I use a lot of difficult words for people that are not native speaking, or have English as their first language, basically, if you don't know what native is. If English isn't your first language, don't feel bad. I interact and use English daily, and I'm aspired to become an author. I love writing in general. I made a few mistakes which I could have corrected myself, which I actually found funny while I read this. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and that will be all. So if you want to help my life or become a bit easier or show appreciation for the video, you can always click to subscribe to my channel, both on Twitch, both on YouTube. Like and follow me on across every media. They're listed next to, well, they're listed under the TF icon on this video. And if you actually want to support or help me out, that would be a lovely gesture as a thanks for the video. Your comments and your follow are always nice. I think I mentioned everything twice now. Sorry guys. Like, it's been 75 minutes in. But I will move on to doing different things for the channel. I poured a lot of hours into this, so I hope you guys are really appreciative of the video and a lot of the points came across to you. Don't feel bad if you don't understand again, and please realize that this is a generalization how you play the game and the champion. It's how I play, it's how I think Dopa plays, and how he analyzes and how I analyze to deal with people that are lower than our own skill, or how to abuse people that also are higher level. Because even the best of players, they have tendencies you can abuse because they get into habits. So never be scared, never get pressured, and just being awesome and enjoy playing the game and Twisted Fate, because he's a hell of a fun champion if you can master him by sheer analysis and intellectual point of view and approach. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's been a really long video, and I'm gonna have a really good time drinking water after this and relaxing. So goodbye for now guys, and thanks for everything.